Below the statue, a small garden was planted with catnip from Earth and harmony crystals from the Velkin homeworld. Cats from the Harmony Corps came here to rest and play, their purring creating a constant symphony of peace that could be heard throughout the station. And sometimes, late at night when the station was quiet, visitors swore they could still hear the ghost of a small orange cat, purring contentedly in the knowledge that he had helped create a galaxy where no being ever had to be afraid of being different. The universe had learned the most important lesson of all. That consciousness was not about thinking perfectly or fighting efficiently or conquering completely. Consciousness was about the simple ability to find comfort in the presence of others, to feel joy in small moments, and to offer friendship without expecting anything in return. It was about learning how to purr. And in a galaxy full of different species, different languages, and different worlds, that was the one song that everyone could learn to sing together. 6 months after Baram first ended a war, Captain Ji-won Kim stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station. Through the wide windows, she watched an impossible sight. Human and Velkin ships worked together to build the largest space station ever created, designed specifically for interspecies cooperation. The war that had lasted 3 years had ended not with a peace treaty, but with something much more powerful. It had ended with friendship. "Captain," said Specialist Yoonji Nam as she approached, with Baram in her arms. "The Velkin children have arrived for today's harmony session." Ji-won smiled at the words Velkin children. Before Baram's mission, no one had known that Velkins even had children. They had hidden their young away, believing that childhood emotions were weaknesses to be overcome as quickly as possible. Now, young Velkins from across their empire came to Unity Station to learn about emotions from cats and their human handlers. The children's natural curiosity and joy, so long suppressed, bloomed when they heard purring for the first time. "How many harmony centers are operating now?" Ji-won asked. 47 on Velkin worlds, 32 on human colonies, and 15 on newly discovered planets where both our species are working together, Yoonji replied. "We have over 200 cats serving as Harmony ambassadors across known space. Each Harmony Center was built around the same concept that had started with Baram. Rescued cats, given love and care by human handlers, shared their contentment with anyone who needed to feel peace. The centers had become places of healing for both species." Down in the station's main Harmony chamber, Admiral Zareth sat on the floor surrounded by a group of young Velkins and human children. 3 cats moved freely among them, purring and accepting, gentle pets from small hands and alien appendages alike. "Tell us again about the first Harmony Maker," requested a young Velkin named Zephyr. Admiral Zareth, who had once commanded fleets in deadly battle, now spent much of his time teaching children about the power of peaceful feelings. "The first Harmony Maker was called Baram," he said in his warm voice that was so different from his old military tone. "He was a small orange cat who had been rescued from a difficult life. When he first arrived at the war, everyone thought he was just a pet. But he taught us something more important than any weapon could." "What did he teach you?" asked a human child. "He taught us that being strong does not mean not feeling anything," Admiral Zareth replied. "Being strong means feeling everything and still choosing to be kind." In another part of the station, the Velkin Supreme Council was meeting with Earth's leadership to plan their next joint project. The old council members who had once ruled through cold logic now brought their grandchildren to work with them. "The Andromedac Sector exploration mission will require the largest cooperation effort in galactic history," said Council Member Thyron, who was currently petting a white cat named Moonbeam. 60 ships from each species working together to map unknown space. President Sarah Chen of Earth nodded in agreement. "Our children will grow up thinking that humans and Velkins have always been friends. They will not even understand how we could have ever been enemies. Perhaps that is the greatest gift the Harmony Makers have given us," said Council Member Thyron. "Not just peace between our species, but the chance to be better than we were. On Haven 7, the planet where the war had raged for so long, something beautiful was growing. The crystal forests that had been destroyed in battle were being replanted by joint human-Velkan teams. But these new forests were different. Sergeant Minho Lee, now a coordinator for the restoration project, watched as Velkan engineers and human botanists worked together to create crystal formations that would sing in harmony with cat purring when the wind blew through them. "It will be the most beautiful music in the galaxy," said his former enemy and now friend, the Velkan engineer Nexon. Private Soyeon Choi, now a specialist in interspecies communication, was teaching young Velkans how to care for the small cats that lived in the new crystal gardens. "Remember," she told her students, "cats choose to trust you. You cannot force them to be your friend. You have to earn their friendship with patience and kindness." The young Velkans listened carefully and practiced being gentle with the cats. For a species that had once believed emotions were weakness, learning to be patient and kind was like learning to use a new sense. Back on Unity Station, Bahram had been officially retired from active diplomatic service. At the age of 7, he was considered an elder statesman among the Harmony makers. He spent his days in comfortable luxury, moving between his favorite napping spots and graciously accepting visitors who wanted to meet the cat who had changed. The galaxy? "Do you think he knows what he accomplished?" asked Commander Tae-hyung-yoon as he watched Bahram play with a feather toy while a group of Velkan dignitaries observed with delight. "I think he knows he is loved," replied Dr. Kyungmin-soo. "And maybe that is all he ever wanted to know." The transformation of the galaxy continued to spread. Species that had heard about the human-Velkan friendship began requesting their own harmony centers. Scientists discovered that many alien species had suppressed their emotional capabilities in the belief that logic was superior to feeling. Earth's animal shelters, once sad places where unwanted pets waited for homes, became training centers for interstellar ambassadors. Every rescued cat, dog, and other therapy animal had the potential to become a bridge between species. The Galactic Harmony Corps, officially established 6 months after the war ended, became the most respected organization in known space. Their mission was simple: to spread the understanding that emotional connection was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. On the first anniversary of Bahram's mission, both the human and Velkan governments declared a new holiday. Harmony Day would be celebrated across all their worlds, and the traditional gift was to adopt a rescue animal from a local shelter. The ceremony took place on Unity Station, with representatives from dozens of species attending. But the guest of honor was still a small orange cat who had never learned to see differences between species. As Admiral Zareth gave his speech about the importance of emotional courage, Bahram did what cats do best. He found the most comfortable spot available, which happened to be on the podium next to the microphone, and began to purr. His purring was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching billions of beings who had learned to find strength in gentleness and power in peace. "1 year ago," Admiral Zareth said, his voice carrying the warmth that had become characteristic of the new Velkan way of speaking, "we believed that consciousness was about thinking perfectly. Now we know that consciousness is about feeling deeply." President Chen stepped forward to present Bahram with a Medal of Honor. As she placed the small decoration around his neck, Bahram purred louder and rubbed against her hand. "To Bahram," she announced, "the first and greatest Harmony ambassador. You taught us that love is not just an emotion. It is the force that holds the universe together." The celebration continued for hours, but eventually, even the most important diplomatic events must end. As the guests departed and the station grew quiet, Jiwon found herself alone in the observation lounge with Bahram. "Look at what you started," she said softly, scratching behind his ears as they watched ships from a dozen species working together to build something beautiful in the stars. Bahram purred and settled into her lap. To him, the most important thing was not the transformed galaxy, or the peace between species, or the harmony centers spreading across known space. The most important thing was this moment: warm hands, gentle voices, and the simple comfort of being loved. Outside the windows, the universe continued its ancient dance, but now it was a dance of friendship instead of fear, cooperation instead of conquest, and harmony instead of hostility. And at the center of it all, the soft rumbling of purring continued to remind everyone that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with the smallest acts of love. Years would pass, and the galaxy would continue to change. New species would join the Harmony Alliance. New Harmony centers would open on distant worlds. Children who had never known war would grow up speaking multiple languages and playing with friends from dozens of different species. But the historians who wrote about this time would always return to the same simple truth. The greatest war in galactic history had ended not because of superior weapons or brilliant strategies or political agreements. It had ended because one small orange cat had reminded the universe how to purr. Barum lived to the remarkable age of 15, spending his final years surrounded by friends from across the galaxy. When he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, his funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the Harmony Alliance. His memorial statue, erected in the center of Unity Station, bore a simple inscription in every known language. Here lies Barum, who taught us that love is stronger than fear, that kindness is more powerful than conquest, and that sometimes the best way to end a fight is simply to purr together. The changes that began with Barum's first mission spread through both fleets like ripples in a pond. Within a week, the entire nature of the war had transformed. Captain Jiwon Kim found herself dealing with problems she had never imagined possible. "Captain," said Lieutenant Hyunwoo Park from his station, "we have 17 Velkan ships requesting permission to approach our position. They all want to hear the Harmony generator." Jiwon looked out at the stars where Velkan and human ships were now flying together in mixed formations. It was a sight that would have been impossible just days before. "What do we do about this?" asked Commander Tae Hyung-yoon. "Our ship was not designed to host alien visitors." The problem was that individual Velkans throughout the sector were abandoning their military duties to seek out sources of purring. Barum had become the most popular being in known space, though he remained completely unaware of his fame. "We need to understand what is happening to them," Jiwon said. "Dr. Su, what have you learned from studying the Velkans who have visited us?" Dr. Kyungmin Su had been working closely with Velkan scientists who were as confused as the humans about their species' transformation. "Captain, we are witnessing something that science says should be impossible," Dr. Su explained. "The Velkans are not just experiencing emotions for the first time. They are remembering emotions from their distant past." He activated a holographic display showing Velkan brain scans. These images show neural pathways that have been inactive for thousands of years suddenly becoming active again. It is as if Barum's purring is unlocking genetic memories. "What kind of memories?" Jiwon asked. According to the Velkan scientist Thronek, their species was very different long ago. They were social creatures who formed family bonds and experienced joy, love, and curiosity. But they evolved to suppress these traits because they believed emotions made them weak. On Haven 7, Sergeant Minho Lee was experiencing the strangest ceasefire in military history. Instead of fighting, human and Velkan soldiers were sharing meals and trying to communicate with each other. "Sergeant," said Private Soyeon Choi, "the Velkan called Nexon wants to know if we have any pictures of cats from Earth." Minho looked at the tall alien who was sitting next to their campfire. Nexon had been part of an assault unit just a week ago. Now he spent his days asking questions about Earth animals and trying to understand human emotions. "Tell him we can. Show him videos from the ship's database," Minho said. When they played videos of cats playing and purring, Nexon made musical sounds that were clearly expressions of delight. Other Velkans gathered around to watch, making their own attempts at purring. They are like children discovering toys for the first time, Soyon observed. Back on the Defiance, specialist Yunji Nam was working with Velkan engineers to solve a growing problem. The demand for harmony generation was far greater than one cat could provide. "We are trying to create artificial purring sounds," explained the Velkan scientist Thronek, "but they do not produce the same effects as the real harmony maker." Thronek had been one of the first Velkans to experience emotions. The change in him was remarkable. Where once he had been cold and logical, now he showed curiosity, kindness, and something resembling affection for the humans he worked with. "There is something special about Baram specifically," Yunji said. "Maybe it is not just the sound of purring. Maybe it is the fact that he genuinely feels content and peaceful." "You mean the emotions behind the sound are important too?" Thronek asked. "That is what we think," Yunji replied. "Baram purrs because he is happy. That happiness somehow transfers to anyone who hears him." This discovery led to an unexpected solution. Earth Command began sending more cats to the war zone. Not just any cats, but specifically rescue cats who had learned to trust humans and find peace after difficult starts in life. Within 2 weeks, there were 12 cats serving on different ships throughout the fleet. Each cat was paired with a handler and became the center of human-Velkan friendship groups. The effects on Velkan society were profound. For the first time in their recorded history, individual Velkans began making personal choices instead of following collective decisions. Some chose to continue military service, but others requested transfers to scientific research or cultural exchange programs. "Captain," said Communications Officer Minji Yu, "we are receiving a transmission from the Velkan homeworld. It is from their Supreme Council." The message that appeared on the main screen showed 5 ancient Velkans who ruled their entire empire. They looked troubled and confused. "Human leaders," the central figure spoke, "our forces in your sector have requested something unprecedented. They wish to establish permanent bases near your harmony generators. They claim these devices are awakening their true nature. Furthermore," another council member continued, "our military effectiveness has decreased by 60% as individual soldiers pursue personal interests instead of following orders. We demand an explanation." Jiwan stood to respond. "Honored council members, we are not using weapons against your forces. We are sharing something that we believe belongs to all conscious beings, the right to feel joy, curiosity, and friendship. These emotions make our forces weak," the first council member stated. "Do they?" Jiwan asked. "Or do they make your people more complete?" The conversation with the Velkan Council lasted for hours. Human diplomats and Velkan philosophers joined the discussion. But the most powerful moment came when they brought Baram to meet the council via video link. When the Supreme Council members heard Baram purring, the change was visible even through the transmission. Their rigid postures softened. Their voices became warmer. For the first time in centuries, the rulers of the Velkan Empire experienced wonder. "This small creature," one council member said quietly, "makes us remember things we thought were lost forever." Another council member made a sound that was clearly an attempt at purring. We feel as if we are awakening from a very long sleep." The political implications were enormous. Across Velkan space, civilians who heard about the harmony generators began demanding access to similar experiences. Scientists who had been working on military projects switched to studying consciousness and emotion. Artists began creating works inspired by feelings they were experiencing for the first time. On the Defiance, Jiwan found herself hosting daily meetings between human and Velkan representatives. The conference room had been modified with comfortable seating for both species, and Baram had claimed a special cushion in the center of the table. "We need to formalize this relationship," said Admiral Zareth during one of these meetings. But our traditional treaties are based on conquest and submission. We have no framework for a partnership based on mutual affection. Maybe we need to create a new kind of agreement, suggested Commander Yoon. Something that has never existed before. A friendship treaty, Dr. Su proposed, based not on political advantage, but on shared emotional growth. As they discussed the possibilities, Barum did what cats do best. He found the warmest spot in the room, which happened to be next to Admiral Zareth, and settled in for a nap. His purring filled the room with peaceful vibrations. The Velkan admiral, who had once commanded fleets in devastating battles, carefully adjusted his position so he would not disturb the sleeping cat. In all our history, Admiral Zareth said, softly, we never imagined that peace could feel so comfortable. Outside the ship's windows, human and Velkan vessels continued their new dance of friendship. Engineering teams from both species worked together to modify ships for cross-species cooperation. Cultural exchange programs were being planned. Scientists were collaborating on projects that would benefit both civilizations. And at the center of it all was one small orange cat who had taught two species that the greatest strength was not in conquest, but in the simple ability to find comfort in each other's presence. The war was ending not with surrender or victory, but with the much more powerful force of mutual understanding and affection. It was ending because both sides had learned something that Barum had known all along. Love was stronger than fear, and sometimes the best way to end a fight was simply to purr. News of what happened with the Velkan patrol spread faster than anyone expected. Within 12 hours, every human ship in the fleet knew about Barum and his amazing first mission. Within 24 hours, the Velkan High Command was demanding answers from their field commanders. Captain Ji-won Kim sat in her quarters reading reports from across the sector. Human pilots were reporting that Velkan fighters were flying differently. Instead of their usual perfect attack patterns, individual Velkan ships were breaking formation and approaching human ships with what looked like curiosity rather than hostility. "Captain," said Communications Officer Minji Yu over the intercom, "we are receiving a formal communication from the Velkan fleet. They want to arrange a meeting." Ji-won hurried to the bridge. This was the first time in 3 years that the Velkans had asked for a meeting instead of just attacking. "Put the message through," she ordered. The main screen filled with the image of a Velkan commander. He looked like all Velkans, tall, thin, with 4 arms and metallic-looking skin. But something was different about his posture. He seemed less rigid than usual. "I am Admiral Zareth of the Velkan Third Fleet," the alien said. "We request a formal meeting to discuss the device you used against our patrol yesterday." "Device?" Ji-won asked. "The harmony generator," Admiral Zareth continued. "Our soldiers report that it created sensations they have never experienced. We must understand how this weapon works." Ji-won looked around at her crew. Everyone was trying not to smile. The Velkans thought Barum was a weapon. "We are willing to meet," Ji-won said carefully. "But we have conditions, too. The meeting must be held in neutral space, and we will bring our harmony generator with us." Admiral Zareth's image flickered as he talked with other Velkans off-screen. When he turned back, his voice carried something that sounded almost like eagerness. "We agree to your terms," he said, "but we must warn you. If your harmony generator is truly a weapon, we will defend ourselves." "It is not that kind of weapon," Ji-won said. "You will understand when you meet it." After the transmission ended, Commander Tae-hyung-yoon turned to Ji-won. "Are we really going to take Barum to meet with Velkan military leaders?" "Do we have a choice?" Ji-won replied. "This might be our only chance to end this war without more people dying." Specialist Yoon-ji Nam was already making preparations. "I will need to modify Barum's travel equipment," she said. "He will need extra protection if we are meeting with Velkans face-to-face." Down on Haven 7, Sergeant Minho Lee was witnessing changes that no human soldier had ever seen. The Velkan forces that had been attacking the colony for months were no longer attacking. Instead, individual Velkans were approaching human defensive positions under white flags. "Sergeant," said Private Soyun Choi, "there is a Velkan outside our perimeter. He says he wants to hear the harmony sounds again." Min-ho looked through his binoculars at the alien soldier. The Velkan was sitting alone on a crystal formation, looking toward the human base. His posture was different from the usual military stance. He looked almost sad. "What should we do?" Soyun asked. Before Min-ho could answer, their radio crackled, with a message from the ship. "All ground units, we are broadcasting the harmony sounds from yesterday's mission. This is part of ongoing diplomatic efforts." Suddenly, Baram's purring filled the air around the human base. The effect on the nearby Velkans was immediate. They stopped their military activities and gathered in small groups, listening to the sound with what looked like wonder. The Velkan soldier outside the perimeter made a sound that the translation computers had never heard before. It was like music, but warm and peaceful instead of cold and commanding. "He is trying to sing," Soyun said in amazement. "No," Min-ho corrected. "He is trying to purr." Back on the Defiance, Baram was completely unaware of the chaos he had created. He spent his day exploring the ship, playing with loose cables and napping in warm places. The crew had fallen in love with him. Even people who had never liked cats found themselves stopping to pet him when he walked by. Dr. Kyungmin Soo was studying the reports from yesterday's mission. "Captain, the changes in Velkan brain activity are unlike anything we have seen," he told Ji-won. "The purring is activating parts of their minds that have been sleeping for thousands of years." "What kind of parts?" Ji-won asked. "The parts that control empathy, curiosity, and social bonding," Dr. Soo explained. "The Velkans evolved to suppress these emotions because they thought emotions made them weak, but Baram's purring is waking them up." The meeting was arranged for the next day at an abandoned space station halfway between the two fleets. It was an old mining station that had been empty for years. Both sides agreed it was neutral territory. As Ji-won prepared for the meeting, she thought about how strange this war had become. 3 days ago, they were enemies shooting at each other. Now they were planning to have diplomatic talks with a cat as the main attraction. "Captain," Yoonji said, as she finished preparing Baram's special diplomatic carrier, "I want you to know that Baram might be frightened by meeting the Velkans. Cats can sense emotions, and the Velkans are experiencing emotions for the first time. It might be overwhelming for him." "Will he be safe?" Ji-won asked. "I think so," Yoonji said, "but we should be ready for anything." The shuttle flight to the abandoned station took 2 hours. Ji-won brought a small diplomatic team, Commander Yoon, Dr. Soo, Yoonji, and of course Baram. The cat traveled in his special carrier, looking out through transparent aluminum windows at the stars. When they docked at the station, they found that the Velkans had arrived first. Admiral Zareth was waiting with a team of his own officers and what appeared to be Velkan scientists. The station's main conference room had been cleaned and prepared for the meeting. Both sides took their places at opposite ends of a long table. The humans placed Baram's carrier in the center of the table. "Before we begin," Admiral Zareth said, "we must see this harmony generator that has affected our forces so dramatically." Yoonji looked at Ji-won, who nodded. She opened the carrier, and Baram stepped out onto the table. The reaction from the Velkans was immediate and stunning. Their rigid postures suddenly relaxed. Several of them made soft sounds that the translation computers identified as expressions of wonder. Admiral Zareth leaned forward and spoke in a voice that was completely different from his usual commanding tone. "It is small," he said quietly, "and soft-looking. How can something so small create such powerful effects?" As if responding to the question, Baram began to purr. The sound filled the conference room with warm, peaceful vibrations. The change in the Velkans was remarkable. One of the scientists actually stood up and moved closer to get a better look at Baram. Another began making soft musical sounds that sounded like an attempt at purring. "What is happening to us?" Admiral Zareth asked. "We feel sensations we have no words for. Our thoughts are becoming unclear, but in a pleasant way." Dr. Sue spoke carefully. "You are experiencing emotions, feelings that your species suppressed long ago. The harmony sounds are awakening parts of your minds that have been sleeping." "These emotions," Admiral Zareth said slowly, "are they what humans call happiness?" "Some of them," Jiwan replied. "You are feeling curiosity, wonder, and perhaps a form of joy." Barum, completely unaware that he was conducting the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history, began exploring the conference table. He sniffed at the Velkin equipment and rubbed against their data tablets. When he approached Admiral Zareth, the alien commander did something that shocked everyone in the room. He very carefully reached out with one of his 4 hands and gently touched Barum's orange fur. "So soft," the Admiral whispered. "We had forgotten that textures could bring pleasure." The meeting continued for hours, but it was unlike any diplomatic negotiation anyone had ever experienced. Instead of arguing about territory and resources, both sides found themselves talking about feelings, curiosity, and the nature of consciousness. As the day ended, Admiral Zareth made a request that would change everything. "We wish to keep some of our forces near your harmony generator," he said. "Not to attack, but to continue experiencing these new sensations. In exchange, we will cease all hostile actions against your colonies." It was not a formal peace treaty, but it was something more important. It was the beginning of understanding between 2 very different species. As they prepared to leave the station, Jiwan realized that this war was ending not through victory or defeat, but through something much more powerful. It was ending through the simple act of 2 species learning to feel together. And it was all because of one small orange cat who had never learned to hate anyone. The morning of Baram's first mission felt different from any other day in the war. Captain Ji-Won Kim stood in the shuttle bay watching Specialist Eunji Nam prepare the special drone that would carry Baram into battle. The drone looked like a small, flying box with cameras and speakers attached to it. Inside was a comfortable space just big enough for 1 cat. Yunji had put soft blankets inside and made sure Baram would have enough air and water for several hours. "Are you sure this will work?" asked Commander Taehyung Yoon as he watched Yunji check the drone's systems. "We will find out soon," Yunji said. "The drone has been tested many times. Baram has practiced flying in it. He seems to enjoy the ride." Baram sat nearby in his orange spacesuit. The suit was specially made to keep him safe if something went wrong. He looked very serious and important, like he knew he had an important job to do. "The target is a Velkin patrol near the northern crystal forest," Jiwan said. "They have been there for 3 days watching our supply routes. This will be a good test because there are only 6 Velkins in the group." Lieutenant Hyunwoo Park was controlling the drone from his station on the bridge. "All systems are ready, Captain. The drone can reach the patrol area in 20 minutes. Yunji gently picked up Baram and placed him inside the drone. "Remember, Baram," she said softly, "just be yourself. Do what you always do." Baram settled into his comfortable space and began purring. The sound came through the drone's speakers, loud and clear. Several crew members found themselves smiling without knowing why. "Launch the drone," Jiwan ordered. The small drone flew out of the shuttle bay and headed toward the planet's surface. On the bridge, everyone watched through the drone's cameras as it flew over the broken crystal forests of Haven 7. Down on the planet, Sergeant Minho Lee was hiding in his observation post when he heard something strange on his radio. "This is Control," said a voice from the ship. "We are testing a new type of communication device near your position. Do not be alarmed by what you see." Minho looked through his binoculars toward the Velkin patrol. The 6 aliens were standing in their usual perfect formation. They had not moved for hours. Then he saw the small drone flying toward them. "What is that thing?" asked Private Soyeon Choi. I have no idea, Minho said, but it is heading straight for the Velkans. On the bridge of the Defiance, everyone watched, the screens with excitement and worry. The drone was getting closer to the Velkan patrol. Soon they would find out if their strange plan would work. The Velkans have noticed the drone, Lieutenant Park reported, but they are not shooting at it. They seem confused. Through the drone's cameras, they could see the Velkan patrol leader pointing at the approaching drone. The aliens were talking to each other in their musical language. But something seemed different about their sounds. The purring is being broadcast now, Yunja said. Bahram is doing exactly what he is supposed to do. The effect was immediate and amazing. The Velkan patrol leader suddenly stopped moving. His tall, thin body began to shake slightly. The other Velkans gathered around him, making sounds that no human had ever heard before. Captain, said Dr. Kyungmin Soo from his station. I am reading the Velkan biosignatures. Their stress levels are dropping fast. But other things are happening too. Parts of their brains that have never been active are suddenly working. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Lee watched in amazement as the Velkan patrol broke their perfect formation. Individual aliens began moving in different directions. They seemed curious about the drone and the strange sound it was making. The patrol leader did something that shocked everyone watching. He sat down on the crystal ground and listened to Bahram's purring. Then he made a sound that the translation computers could not understand. He was trying to purr back. Did you see that? Commander Yoon said in disbelief. The Velkan is trying to copy the cat. It is working, Yunji said quietly. The purring is reaching something inside them, something they forgot they had. Other Velkans began sitting down, too. Soon the entire patrol was on the ground, listening to Bahram's purring and making their own attempts at similar sounds. Captain, said Communications Officer Minji Yu, I am getting a transmission from the Velkan patrol, but it is unlike any Velkan communication we have ever received. Put it through, Ji-won ordered. The bridge filled with musical sounds that were warm and curious instead of cold and commanding. The translation computer worked hard to understand the message. Small flying thing, the computer finally said, makes harmony sounds. We feel something new. What is this feeling? We wish to understand. Ji-won looked around at her crew. Everyone was staring at the screens in amazement. They are asking questions, she said slowly. Velkans never ask questions. They always know everything. The purring is making them curious, Dr. Soo explained. Curiosity is an emotion. For the first time in thousands of years, these Velkans are feeling something other than logical thinking. For 2 hours, the drone stayed near the Velkan patrol. Bahram continued purring, completely unaware that he was making first contact history. The Velkans continued trying to make similar sounds and asking more questions. We need to bring Bahram back, Yunji finally said. He needs food and rest. As the drone flew away, something unexpected happened. One of the Velkans stood up and waved. Goodbye. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. A Velkan just said goodbye, Commander Yoon said in wonder. They have never done anything like that before. When the drone returned to the Defiance, Yoonji carefully lifted Bahram out. The cat stretched and yawned like he had just finished a nice nap. He had no idea that he had just changed the course of galactic history. How do you feel, Bahram? Yoonji asked, petting his orange fur. Bahram purred and rubbed against her hand. To him, it had been a pleasant ride with interesting views. That evening, reports of the incident spread through both the human and Velkan fleets. Human commanders could not believe what they were hearing. Velkan commanders were even more confused. For the first time in the war, Velkan units began asking their leaders questions instead of just following orders. They wanted to know about the Harmony Maker and the strange new feelings it had created. Captain, Lieutenant Park reported, we are receiving messages from Velkan ships throughout the sector. They are all asking the same thing. They want to meet with our Harmony Maker. Ji-won looked down at Bahram. who was sleeping peacefully on her chair. I do not think he is ready for formal diplomatic meetings. Maybe that is exactly why this will work, Dr. Seuss said. Barum does not know he is supposed to be afraid of aliens. He does not know this is supposed to be impossible. He just knows how to be friendly. Outside the ship's windows, Velkin ships were moving in new patterns. Instead of their usual perfect formations, individual ships were moving independently. Some were actually moving closer to human ships, as if they were curious instead of hostile. The war was changing, and it was all because of one small orange cat who had learned how to purr his way into the hearts of an entire alien empire. Tomorrow would bring even bigger changes. Tomorrow, both sides would have to figure out what it meant when enemies suddenly wanted to be friends. The next morning came with the usual sounds of a warship. People walking in the metal hallways, machines humming, voices talking over the communication system. But today felt different to Captain Ji-won Kim. Today, the mysterious package from Earth Command would arrive. She stood in the docking bay and watched the supply shuttle slowly move toward her ship. The shuttle looked small next to the huge Defiance. It carried food, medicine, weapons, and spare parts that the crew needed to keep fighting. "Captain," said Lieutenant Hyun-woo Park, "the shuttle pilot says they have something special for you, something that needs very careful handling." Ji-won felt curious and worried at the same time. What could be so special that it needed careful handling? Maybe it was a new type of weapon. Maybe it was secret information about the Velkins. The shuttle doors opened with a soft hissing sound. Workers began carrying out boxes of supplies. Then Ji-won saw something that made her stop and stare. A young woman in a military uniform was carrying a small cage. Inside the cage was an orange cat. "You must be Captain Kim," the woman said. "I am Specialist Yoonji Nam. This is Barum." Ji-won looked at the cat. The cat looked back at her with bright green eyes. It seemed completely calm and unafraid. "There must be some mistake," Ji-won said slowly. "This is a warship. We do not have pets here." "Barum is not a pet, Captain," Yoonji said. "He is a specialist like me. We are here on direct orders from Earth Command." Commander Tae-hyung-yoon walked over to them. He looked at the cat and then at Ji-won. "Captain, what is going on here?" "I have no idea," Ji-won said. "Let us go to the briefing room. I want to understand what Earth Command is thinking." They walked through the ship's hallways to the briefing room. Several other officers followed them. Everyone was curious about the cat. Word was already spreading through the ship that something very strange had arrived. In the briefing room, Yoonji set the cage on the table. She opened the door, and Barum walked out like he owned the place. He looked around the room, then jumped onto a chair and began cleaning his paw. "This is impossible," said Dr. Kyungmin Soo. "We cannot have animals on a military ship. What about safety rules? What about health concerns?" "Doctor, I understand your worry," Yoonji said, "but Barum has all his medical checks. He is very healthy and very well trained." "Trained for what?" Ji-won asked. "What exactly is this cat supposed to do in a war?" Yoonji took a deep breath. "Captain, our scientists have been studying Velkin communication for 3 years. We finally understand something important about how they talk to each other." She pressed some buttons on a small device. The room filled with sounds that came from Velkin recordings. The sounds were like music, but cold and without feeling. "The Velkins use sound frequencies to communicate," Yoonji explained. "But these frequencies are very similar to sounds that cats make." "What sounds?" Commander Yoon asked. As if he understood the question, Barum began to purr. The sound was deep and warm. It seemed to fill the whole room. Several people found themselves feeling more relaxed without knowing why. "That sound," Yoonji said. "Purring. Our scientists discovered that cat purring uses some of the same sound frequencies that Velkins use to talk. But there is something else." Something more important. She paused and looked around the room. We think that purring might affect Velkan brains in ways they do not expect. How? Jiwan asked. We are not completely sure, Yunji admitted. But we know that purring helps humans feel calm and happy. It might do the same thing to Velkans. It might make them feel emotions they have forgotten how to feel. The room was quiet for a moment. Everyone was thinking about what this meant. So you want to use this cat as a weapon? Dr. Su asked. Not a weapon, Yunji said. More like a communication device. We want to see what happens when Velkan's here. Baram purr. Baram continued purring and began exploring the briefing room. He sniffed at people's boots and rubbed against chair legs. He seemed completely unaware that he was being discussed as a potential war-ending secret weapon. This is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard, said Lieutenant Hyunwoo Park. Earth Command wants us to win a war with a cat. Not win, Yunji corrected. Maybe find a different way to end it. A way that does not involve more people dying. Jiwan watched Baram as he jumped onto the table and walked toward her. The cat looked at her with his bright green eyes, then rubbed his head against her hand. Without thinking, she began petting him. The purring got louder. Where did you find him? Jiwan asked. The Soul Animal Sanctuary, Yunji said. Baram was a rescue cat. He was going to be put to sleep because no one wanted him. Then the Feline Therapy Corps selected him for this mission. There is a Feline Therapy Corps? Commander Yoon asked in disbelief. It is new, Yunji said. Created just for this war. Baram was the first cat they trained for military service. Dr. Su leaned closer to examine Baram. What kind of training does a military cat receive? He learned to stay calm in loud places. He learned to travel in spaceships without getting sick. He learned to wear a special suit that will keep him safe in dangerous environments. As they talked, more crew members began gathering outside the briefing room. Everyone wanted to see the cat. Through the doorway, Jiwan could see people whispering and pointing. Captain, said Communications Officer Minji Yu as she entered the room. I'm getting reports from all over the ship. The crew is very excited about our new arrival. Jiwan looked at the faces around her. For the first time in months, people were smiling. The cat was already having an effect on human morale. All right, Jiwan said finally. We will try this, but I want to know exactly how you plan to use Baram against the Velkans. Yunji opened a case and pulled out what looked like a small spacesuit designed for a cat. It was orange to match Baram's fur. We modified a reconnaissance drone, she explained. Baram can travel safely inside it while his purring is broadcast through external speakers. The drone can get close to Velkan forces without being seen as a threat. And then what happens? Jiwan asked. Then we find out if our theory is correct, Yunji said. We find out if the sound of purring can reach something deep inside Velkan minds, something they thought they had lost forever. Baram jumped down from the table and began exploring the rest of the room. He found a loose cable and started playing with it like it was a toy mouse. Look at him, Dr. Su said quietly. He has no idea he might change the course of this war. Maybe that is exactly why he can do it, Jiwan said. He is not trying to be a weapon or a diplomat or a hero. He is just being himself. That evening, Jiwan sat in her quarters with Baram sleeping on her desk. She was reading reports about the cat's training and the science behind the mission. The more she read, the more she realized how desperate Earth Command had become. They were willing to try anything to end this war, even something as strange as using a rescue cat. Outside her window, she could see Velkan ships in the distance. Those ships contained beings who had never felt joy or love or comfort. They had turned their backs on emotion because they thought it made them weak. But what if they were wrong? What if the thing they thought made them weak could actually make them strong? Tomorrow, they would find out. Tomorrow, Baram would make his first mission into battle, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Ji-won Kim stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars through the large windows. But these were not peaceful stars. They were stars at war. For 3 long years, humans had been fighting the Velkan Empire. The war started when both sides wanted the same planets in the Andromeda sector. These planets had valuable metals that both humans and Velkans needed for their ships and cities. Ji-won pressed her hand against the cold metal wall of her ship. She was tired, so very tired of this war. "Captain," said Lieutenant Hyun-woo Park, from his station, "we have another problem. The Velkans are moving toward Haven 7 again." Haven 7 was a small mining colony. About 50,000 humans lived there. They dug metals from deep underground and sent them back to Earth. The colony was important, but it was also weak. If the Velkans took Haven 7, they would control this whole part of space. Through the windows, Ji-won could see Velkan ships moving like silver fish through the darkness. Their ships were beautiful in a scary way. They looked like crystals that someone had shaped into weapons. When they fired their guns, bright blue light cut through space like knives. "How many ships do they have this time?" Ji-won asked. 43 fighters and 12 big ships, Hyun-woo answered. "We have 40 fighters and 10 big ships that can still fight." The numbers were almost equal. This was the problem with fighting the Velkans. They always brought just enough ships to match what humans had. Not more, not less. They planned everything like a math problem. Ji-won had fought many battles against the Velkans. She knew how they thought. They were very smart. They never made mistakes. They never got angry or scared or confused. They just looked at a battle like a puzzle and found the best way to win. But that also meant they could not understand humans. Humans did strange things sometimes. They took risks that did not make sense. They fought even when winning seemed impossible. This confused the Velkans. "Send a message to all ships," Ji-won said. "We will hold the line around Haven 7. Do not let any Velkan ship get close to the planet." "Yes, Captain," Hyun-woo said. His fingers moved quickly over his control panel. On the planet below, Sergeant Min-ho Lee was getting ready for another battle. He checked his weapon and looked at the other soldiers in his unit. They were good soldiers, but they looked tired too. Min-ho had been fighting on Haven 7 for 8 months. The planet was strange and beautiful. It had 2 suns that made the sky look orange during the day. The ground was covered with crystals that grew like trees. When the wind blew, the crystals made music. But now the crystal forests were broken. Battles had turned the pretty planet into a wasteland. Burned ground and broken crystals stretched as far as anyone could see. "Sergeant Lee," said Private Soyeon Choi, "do you think we can hold them off this time?" Min-ho looked at the young soldier. Soyeon was new to the war. She still believed they could win quickly and go home. Min-ho did not want to tell her the truth. The truth was that this war might never end. "We will do our job," Min-ho said. "That is what soldiers do." Through his binoculars, Min-ho watched the Velkan ground forces move across the crystal plains. The aliens were tall and thin. They had 4 arms and skin that looked like metal. Their armor was white and smooth. It reflected the light from the 2 suns. The Velkans moved in perfect lines. Every step was exactly the same. When one Velkan turned left, they all turned left at exactly the same time. They talked to each other with sounds that were like music, but cold music without feeling. "They are like machines," Soyeon said quietly. "No," Min-ho said. "Machines break down sometimes. Machines make mistakes. The Velkans never make mistakes." This was the biggest problem in fighting the Velkans. Human. Soldiers got tired. They got scared. They made bad choices when they were angry or sad. But Velkans never seemed to feel anything at all. In space above the planet, the battle was starting again. Human fighters flew toward the Velkan ships. Laser beams and missiles filled the darkness between the stars. Ji-won watched from her bridge as her pilots fought bravely. But she could see that this battle would be like all the others. Both sides would fight until they were too tired to continue. Then both sides would pull back and wait for the next battle. "Captain," said Commander Tae-Hyung-yoon, "we are losing too many good pilots. If this keeps up, we will not have enough people left to defend the colony." Ji-won knew he was right. Every battle cost human lives. Every battle made their forces weaker. The Velkans seemed to have unlimited ships and soldiers, but humans did not. "There has to be another way," Ji-won said quietly. That night, after the battle was over, Ji-won sat alone in her quarters. She was reading reports from Earth Command. The reports said the same thing every week. The war was not going well. More colonies were under attack. More human ships were being destroyed. The door to her quarters made a soft beeping sound. "Come in," Ji-won said. Dr. Kyungmin Soo entered the room. He was the ship's medical officer. He took care of wounded soldiers and tried to keep everyone healthy. "Captain, I wanted to talk to you about the crew," Dr. Soo said. "They are getting depressed. This war is hurting their minds as much as their bodies." Ji-won looked at the doctor. "What do you suggest?" "Back on Earth, we used therapy animals to help people feel better. Dogs and cats can make people happy even in dark times. But of course we cannot have pets on a warship." Ji-won nodded. She understood what the doctor meant, but he was right. A military ship was no place for animals. Just then, her communication system made a sound. A message was coming in from Earth Command. Ji-won pressed a button, and Admiral Sung-Jin Cho appeared on her screen. The admiral looked older than the last time Ji-won had seen him. "The war was aging everyone quickly. Captain Kim," the admiral said, "I am sending you something special. It will arrive on tomorrow's supply ship. This might be exactly what we need to break this stalemate." "What kind of special equipment, sir?" Ji-won asked. The admiral smiled for the first time in months. "You will see, Captain. Just remember that sometimes the best weapons are the ones nobody expects." After the admiral ended the call, Ji-won sat in her chair and wondered what Earth Command was sending. New weapons? A secret technology? Some kind of super soldier? Outside her window, the stars continued their ancient dance. But tomorrow, something would arrive that would change everything. Something that would end the war in a way that nobody, human or Velkan, could possibly imagine. On the planet below, Sergeant Lee was standing guard duty. He looked up at the stars and wondered if his family back on Earth was looking at the same stars. He missed them terribly. The crystal forests around his base made their music in the wind. It was a sad song tonight. But Sergeant Lee did not know that very soon there would be a different kind of music in this war. A music that would touch the hearts of enemies and turn them into friends. Tomorrow would bring changes that nobody expected. Tomorrow would bring hope in a very small and orange package.